When we came up with the idea of Workstyle, something like 67% of employees said they were unhappy in their work, which says to us that fundamentally work isn't working when more people are unhappy and not enjoying it than are.
Alex, Lizzie, thank you for joining me. I am honoured to have, am I right in saying, best-selling authors with me on the podcast today?
Yes.
Going up in the
Very
world.
exciting. Thank you for having us.
No worries at all.
Thanks for having us. Feels a bit surreal hearing you say that. But it's still haven't got used to
it. Yeah. So I'm sure other people would have the books plastered all over their background, but you two are obviously very, very modest. Is there?
Wow. It is the
I've got one on the shelf.
It's real subtle.
I like it. So obviously we can delve into the book, which I'm sure we'll do as we go through. But I'm curious how you guys met, because you're not a couple.
We're not a couple. We like to establish at the start of podcasts that we are not a couple. We have co-authored books and run businesses for the last 10 years together. Alex and I worked together in a previous life, and we had a kind of meeting of minds in the pub where we came up with a new word called Workstyle, and that's kind of inextricably bound our lives together for the last decade. So really it all started in the pub.
As all good ventures do, and all good ideas.
It's amazing what 2-for-1 cocktails will do for not only your ability to come up with new ideas, but also your willingness to open up to the people you work with. So prior to that conversation in the pub that night, I'd actually reached burnout and realised that I needed to make some pretty major changes to the way that I lived my life. I would wake up at 5:30, leave the house at 6:30 to get to the office for 7:30. It was important for me to be the first one there. And then I would leave and get home 12 hours later and do it 5 days a week. And I kept it up for years. And I think the reason I kept it up for years actually was because I did really enjoy my work. But I think what was fundamentally there was a belief in myself that if I worked as much as I physically could, then nobody could ask any more of me than that. Be that my line managers or myself, frankly. But eventually I became ambivalent to the highs of work. I became really numb to the lows, really detached from the work I was doing. And it took my wife, Sarah, telling me that I'd become a shadow of myself for me to realise that something had to change. So we did what most people would do and took a week off. We went on holiday to Spain in the hope that would help. But I can't tell you much about that holiday because I wasn't actually present enough to be forming any memory of it. And that was when it became clear, when we got back from that holiday, and that was the way I felt, that it became clear that this was a mental health challenge that would need something other than time away to fix. I needed a new way of thinking about work, a new psychological relationship with work, and one that was based more on output and outcomes more than input, not how much I was working, not how many hours I was doing, not how much of myself I was giving, but what was that work actually achieving? And that was kind of the thing that I wanted to talk to Lizzie about that night, or eventually ended up talking to Lizzie about that night. And that's kind of where we also had a meeting of minds, but I'll let Lizzie tell her story.
So my story is a bit different, although it also leads me to the same conversation with Alex in the pub. But for me, it was really when I had my first child, my son Finn, that I would say my eyes were really opened to the enduring inequalities at work. And given what we do now, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that until then I was relatively ignorant about how unequal work was. But when I had Finn, suddenly my eyes were opened to the fact that I didn't want to work during his every waking hour in an office. I wanted to work during nap times or in the evenings when he was asleep because I wasn't going out anymore. And so I also wanted to be judged on my output rather than being in an office at a fixed time when traditional work told me that I had to be. But for me, the conversation doesn't really, or the story doesn't really end there, because that was what led me to the conversation in the pub with Alex. But it was 2 years after that conversation when we started Hoxby, we were testing the concept of Workstyle in practice, that I had some serious complications in my second pregnancy with my twin daughters, Zoe and Megan. So that meant I had to have surgery when I was 23 weeks pregnant, and then be on bed rest for 9 weeks. And during those 9 weeks, being able to work with only a select few people, knowing about my personal circumstances, was amazing. It was life-changing, actually. It gave me a world to escape into during, frankly, long anxiety-ridden days at home on my own. And against the odds, both our daughters survived. And the day we brought them home from hospital and couldn't even begin to fit the double pram through the front door of our London flat, we actually kept the pram in the car for a whole year because we couldn't fit it in the front door. We decided it was probably time to move across the country to Bristol, which was something I was able to do with no disruption to my career at all. Thank you, Workstyle. And then fast forward to 2020, and out of the blue, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which, as you can imagine, turned my world upside down as a seemingly healthy 38-year-old. But again, Workstyle working was my outlet, a digital working world to escape into, to do as much or as little as I felt up to that day or week. And it massively helped me because it helped the cancer diagnosis not to define me. It helped pass the time in the chemo chair. It helped thoughts of cancer not to just fill my head all the time, which I was so determined that it wouldn't. And almost unbelievably, since then, my husband's been diagnosed with cancer. So now it's been a bit of a rough few years. But now I fit my work around supporting him through his treatment, trying to stay healthy myself and managing the side effects of my medication, looking after 3 fun but exhausting small children. And so I think for me, Workstyle has gone from being just a conversation in the pub to something that has, properly changed my life. And I've been able to experience that firsthand.
Wow. I mean, amazing stories. I feel I don't have anything to compete with those two, but kind of similar. They're not as bad, but I remember I was, been in a corporate job for 15 years and moved around various different departments in that time. And like I said on a previous podcast, it's probably come out before this one, the culture is completely different depending on which department you go to, even in the same company. And when I went to supply chain, had not complete burnout, but very similar feelings of just like, I cannot possibly do everything in any amount of time that I work. And I guess before then, I'm quite a nice person. I don't like to say no to anyone doing anything. So it's like, well, I don't want to say no to someone asking for something and then go for lunch. Or I don't want to say no to someone and then, come in at 9. I like come in at 8:30 or 7:30 or whenever. So, just taking more and more on, and you get to the point you're like, oh my gosh, I just feel so much pressure. And, it seems like you two just had to sort of take that upon yourself. And I guess I found that a bit like liberating. And once you get to that point, although you've gone through the pain of going through it, you kind of think, well, I can't possibly do everything. So then you're like, well, now I need to just be focused on results, and the small, whatever I can do to get those results is like, they're still going to get some results rather than being focused on time. I'm Gavin Jones, founder and director at MeeTime, where we help organisations work more efficiently, happening to use Microsoft 365 to do it. If you want to know what Microsoft can unlock for your business, then check out one of the links in the description below.
And we've spoken to hundreds of people over the last almost 10 years since we came up with the idea of Workstyle. And almost all of them have a moment in their life which acts as a catalyst for taking matters into their own hands when it comes to work. At some point, everyone makes the decision that actually I would rather take it upon myself to decide when and where I work. And in large part, that means going self-employed, but we can talk about that separately. But it's more that they want that autonomy because the way that work is treating them and the way they feel about their work is so bad, it's so negative, that the risk of going alone is more attractive than the idea of staying with the situation as it is. And I think that lots of people are in a position in work where they feel unhappy. When we came up with the idea of Workstyle, something like 67% of employees said they were unhappy in their work, which says to us that fundamentally work isn't working when more people are unhappy and not enjoying it than are. And I think that, that's really what we wanted to try and fix at the time, which was to say, okay, let's give ourselves and everybody we work with the freedom to define when and where they work for themselves, so they can fit work around life, so that the two don't come into tension. And let's give that a word, because that doesn't exist. And so we came up with the word Workstyle on the basis that if you can have a lifestyle and make lifestyle choices, why can't you also have a work style and make work style choices of your own too, and start to give people more autonomy to define their own work style and see what that looks like. And so, as Lizzie said, we started Hoxby as the prototype environment for that, the place where work style could be tested. And we've been working in a work style way ever since, and have worked with thousands of people through the work that we've done for Hoxby, all of whom have had the freedom to decide their own work styles too.
Awesome. And I guess, like you mentioned, that everyone's got that moment and sort of decide, it seems like they take it upon themselves. I guess I was lucky enough to have a couple of very good bosses in my corporate career where, a couple of times I've been to them and they said, look, I just can't possibly do everything. I just remember specifically one boss was like, look, I don't care if you go to these meetings or not. I don't care when you show up at work. I thought, I just care about this metric. If you get that metric, I don't care how you get it. And that was like, quite revolutionary for most people in corporate jobs. And another boss that was like, he's like, I don't care if you come in the office. I don't care what you do. It's like, well, you just, I know that you're going to do some good stuff. Just crack on with whatever you think you need to do. But presumably that's quite rare. And I'm curious that I have joined your Slack channel now, which is called the Workstyle Revolution. And so I'm curious to hear more about like the revolutionary aspect of Workstyle and whether you're trying to encourage other employers to sort of have that same sort of mindset.
Yeah, so the concept of Workstyle, as Alex says, is about autonomous working, the freedom to choose when and where you work. And really that's about individualizing work. So it's about recognizing that as an individual, we each have, unique elements of our life. Lots of people will have things in common with me, but very few will have exactly the same life circumstances that I'm juggling at this particular time, for instance. And that's true across the board. And we really spent the last decade trying this in practice with Hoxby. As Alex said, it's a prototype organization. We wanted to prove that this could work. People could work when and where they choose, as much or as little as they wanted to be judged on their output. Following the success of the book, we started the Workstyle Revolution community, which you're part of, Gavin, and it's an open community. Anyone can join it. It's a Slack community. And it's really for anyone who has read the book or who believes in this way of working and who wants to adopt it for themselves or for their organization, or just wants to be part of this movement to something that we know improves well-being, productivity, and has a massive impact on society. And I think the thing that we feel is really revolutionary is this isn't just a new way of talking about work. It's a complete reframing of the system of work. And it's one that is fit for the digital age. So if you look at the 9 to 5 working day, 5 days a week, that's more than 200 years old. It's industrial age thinking. The great social reformer Sir Robert Owen, or Sir Bobby O, to those of us who are mega fans, came up with the concept of 8 hours labour, 8 hours recreation, and 8 hours rest more than 200 years ago. And at the time, that was revolutionary. But when you look at the changes in our working practices since then, actually, all we've really done is tweaked it at the edges. So take something like flexible working, which is 70 years old. So actually not that much of a new concept, but relatively new compared to industrial age thinking. That is just tweaking that industrial age thinking. It's saying, can I flex that 5-day week, that 9 to 5 working around my life? Whereas what we're saying is, this is a revolution. This is because technology has changed, attitudes to work has changed, the demographic of the workforce is radically changing. And now we should all be judged on our output and be able to work when and where we choose. And so since the book has been so successful, we've created the Workstyle Revolution community because we believe that individuals are the people who can create that change, be it through the way they work themselves, through using the word Workstyle, through telling people about the book, or through speaking to their line managers, managing their teams differently, speaking to HR people in their organizations, or trying to revolutionize their entire organization. Because what you talk about is not unusual, that actually within every organization, there are a couple of line managers within that organization that are basically trailblazing Workstyle. They don't have a word for it. They should probably read the book, but they're already behaving in that way. And the people who work for them get that amazing feeling of autonomy and empowerment and probably thrive in their roles because of it. But at the moment, that's dependent on the individual line manager rather than being done at a systemic level or adopted at an organizational level. And that's the change that we're trying to create through the Workstyle Revolution now. Beyond what we can do at Hoxby, what can we do as individuals in order to create significant change in the world?
Awesome. And I guess we mentioned Hoxby a couple of times. I guess for anyone that doesn't know anything about Hoxby, I guess how would you describe it?
In simple terms, it's a creative communications and now transformation agency. It's made up of around 500 freelancers globally. They are geographically distributed, highly diverse, and incredibly talented. And what we're able to do by having an entirely freelance and entirely online community is pull that community together into specifically curated teams to answer briefs for clients. So the teams that we're able to put together are by far and away more tailored to each brief than they ever could be if we were limited to a number of employees. And what that also means is that not only are they incredibly talented and diverse, that they're also collectively intelligent because they have that diversity of thought and that talent that they apply to every challenge. And collective intelligence is an emerging science of understanding how clever we are or how smart we are as a group, rather than how smart we are as individuals. And I suppose high collective intelligence can be thought of as the opposite of groupthink. So I think we understand that phraseology of when you get people who look, think, talk, and act the same, they tend to agree, and you tend to miss the opportunity for diverse perspectives and diverse thinking that might lead to richer solutions. So that's what Hoxby does. It applies collective intelligence to solving problems, mostly in creative and communications, and also in now transformation, as I said. And transformation is really about helping organizations to change to more autonomous ways of working, the likes of which we've been piloting for the last 9 years. So that's what Hoxby does. And everything that we learn in the pursuit of that work and in doing that work, we feed into the Workstyle Revolution as tools, insight, knowledge, information to help people and businesses to improve the way that they work. And that's become particularly relevant post-pandemic, where the conversation about ways of working has escalated, and there's lots of information out there, but not lots of organizations who've been testing and learning through doing in the same way that Hoxby has, in the way that we can help.
Interesting.